Hi. Really? I can't. Okay, ready to start? Are you ready? Thank you, Casey. I got one ready. Okay. Hi. I just didn't feel like standing. Honey? Honey? Welcome. Here's a water. Here. There's a microphone.
Where?
See right there? Yeah. Okay, so tonight we were going to answer questions on marriage, parenting, family, those sorts of questions, answers. Dawn and I will do our best to field them. The questions that came in so far, some of them, Dawn and I were looking at each other in the kitchen going, I don't know. So maybe other people in the room have more than I don't know. So we want to leave that open tonight too. It does make me a little nervous to take your questions. Not so much because I'm afraid of your questions. I'm afraid to answer them. Because sometimes the specific questions that you have are really for you and your spouse and the Lord to answer. So just so you know tonight, we will give our thoughts on some of these questions, but I'm really hoping that if you have a spouse, talk to your spouse about it. If you don't, you have the Lord. Dawn and I have really learned to trust our own hearts with a lot of this. And when we did really not know what to do, we did ask questions. Or, even better, we didn't have to ask questions. We could remember examples we saw or experienced in lives of people. So that always helped too. Good. So before we get to some of the questions that were sent in ahead of time, does anybody want to start us out with one that you brought with you? Yeah. Is there another mic, Reese, that I just don't? Okay. Thank you.
I'm not scared.
I know you're not. It's good.
So, something that Amber and I are struggling right now with in our wondrous journey of parenthood is wondrous. Most times. How do you help a child to recognize when they are, I'm trying to think of how to word, being so prideful that they really will not take correction, or they can't even, like even when you tried to bring it, no matter which angle you come at, loving, firm, strong, whatever, it's just not received whatsoever.
Age?
Eldest.
Okay. I didn't have, okay, yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
I mean, everyone knows how old my kids are. I don't. 12, 9, 3, 2. Recently 12. Going on.
Is it a moment of pride, or is it an ongoing current attitude of?
Oh, it's
ongoing. Okay. So just in case it's both or one or the other, first thing I thought about, if it's just a moment of pride, and this is just more than just pride, it's also any emotional state that doesn't allow the child to receive. You don't have to bring the correction in the moment. That's something Dawn and I had to learn, is that we had to learn to wait for teachable moments, open moments, and not, oftentimes the heat of the moment was not the time to have the needed discussion that needed to be had. Oh, don't worry, Dawn and I still said stuff, just because we were frustrated too. That's part of being a parent. But we always knew we had to come back to it to when it was much more of an open-hearted time for them. So always look for teachable moments. I'm willing to bet that even with your eldest, there are more teachable moments than others, Matt. And the thing is, almost like you have to keep it in the back of your mind that, yes, we just had this exchange, and this does need to be talked about, and maybe almost have it in the back of your mind all the time, and when it's you and him, just by yourselves, and you can just tell you've gotten to a place with him where he's really getting you, and he's really enjoying you, and he's really getting a lot of your life. I mean, this might sound strange, but might need to go out and buy him an ice cream cone to kind of break down that pride and that wall a little bit, and then have that moment, whatever that looks like for him. I don't think it's wrong for a parent to be forceful either. And I don't think that's just personality, like Mark's personality, because that's probably not my initial tact, is to try to be forceful. But if my child has not received, especially at this age, because you said 12, right? At this age, reason should definitely be the main form of discipline or correction, is actual verbal reasoning, where you sit down and you have a discussion. And if that doesn't happen, I become more forceful with my tone. I become stronger with my tone. And I don't want to say intimidate, but I want to make sure that my child knows I am still in charge here. And I think there is a healthy amount of fear that our children should have of us that pride oftentimes ignores, especially pride. So, like, even my children are 22 down to 14. I still think they have a healthy fear of mom and dad when they need to have it. I don't think it's wrong. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I heard all kinds of preachers, especially in this love movement, say fear doesn't mean fear. It actually does. It actually means being afraid of the power of God. It means recognizing that this God who we love, this God who loves us in return, also could smite us in like a moment. We have to recognize that that is available in him. And John, at the very last verse of John 3 says, and the wrath of God still abides on those who do not believe. That's not the anger only. That is the full, manifold, emotional state of God is toward us, which means at any moment his anger could surprise you. So, Matt, I don't think your anger towards your children is bad. If it's your main and only, then it'll wear them out, and they'll just form another kind of wall. So, first off, I would say look for teachable moments. Even if you have to do a little bit of, it looks like bribery, it isn't. You're just trying to create that teachable moment. Or, I mean, you're 6'6".
Oh, I know they're afraid of it.
Yeah. That fear will wake people up out of their pride. Seriously.
I guess I'm waiting.
Well, you might need to be more consistent with it then. Yeah. I'm serious.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could just be very open, I feel like I'm consistent with it.
Mm-hmm.
Consistent so much to the point that I feel like that's becoming my personality.
How about the first option of creating a teachable moment where you do something really special and
Again, I feel like Amber and I do that. At least we try to do it. I feel like in most moments it's usually we start with that or try to start with that, and it's just automatic
shut down?
Yeah. Or immature response.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, what do you think?
I was just thinking about...
I'm not sure that's on.
Yeah? Okay. I was just thinking about, and maybe you've already tried this, but the directness of talking about pride and what the Bible says and what, you want him to see past how, the feeling of pride to actually what it does to other people, which I'm sure you've done because it is affecting other people, but also just to be very direct about pride and teaching about that pride. Because the other thing, too, is... Oh, shoot, I lost my thought.
I hate that.
But being direct is the one thing. And then also, what is feeding that pride? That's it. So find the things like what... So tell me why you feel this way. Like, what is feeding that? And then, just be real honest about what the Bible does say about pride.
Something else I was just thinking, Matt, along those lines. The Lord says to humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Then it also says humble yourself, or it says the Lord will humble us. So, God, this sounds harsh, but I'm just going to say it. I would create scenarios where your child realizes they aren't as awesome as they think they are. Humble yourself or I will humble is basically the Spirit of the Lord. So create a scenario where he comes to the end of himself and he realizes that whatever he currently has pride in, it's actually a very limited resource that he currently has. And there's a lot more to still discover about himself. And that humility will come. You might have to create circumstances where he comes to the end of himself and realizes his pride is somewhat unfounded. Is my son in the room? He's with the kids? Specifically with Anderson. And you guys would probably think, knowing Anderson, oh, he doesn't need this. Yeah, right. Here's the reason why he doesn't need this. Early on, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, I regularly took him through courage challenges. Some of you might have remembered me talking about this, where I would purposely take him to the place where he could not do a thing, where he was coming face to face with his own fears, his own lack of ability, his own lack of understanding, and he would have to realize, I have more, not only in me, but more to learn of you and of life. And that caused him to have this healthy state of, I'm not all that. I can be. I have this ability inside of me to be more. But Anderson regularly, I would say several times a year, I would take him specifically. I'll never forget the day, and you guys are going to think this is really mean, so I'm putting myself out there. I think I might have told this story to some of you. I put 2 chairs apart from each other like 1 or 2 feet. Anybody remember me telling this story? And I kept moving it apart until he could not, and he literally jumped and hurt himself because he couldn't reach the other chair. And he was mad at me because he told me, Dad, I am not going to be able to reach that chair. And I think you can. I think you can. And he jumped and he missed, and his knees hit the metal part of that chair, and he's all mad at me. Yeah, I know. Everybody's like, what a jerk. Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, you weren't there. Something happened inside of him. He wasn't angry with me. He was angry with me prior because he told me, Dad, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And I said, yes, you can. And right as soon as he hit it, you think he'd be really mad at me saying, I told you I couldn't do it. And instead, before he could even say that, I said, son, here's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to show you there's always more. There's always more for you, and there's always more inside of you. The 3 jumps prior to that, he had told me 3 times, I can't do that jump, and he did it each time. So 3 times he found out more inside of him than he realized he had. And on the 4th one, he realizes there's still more. And in that, my son is very humble. Megan Durniak might not think so all the time, because I think there's a little bit of... Sometimes he acts a little more arrogant around her than he probably should. But otherwise, I think that was part of the deal. So find his limitations. Create circumstances where he realizes, like, all right, I thought I was that and I'm not. If the Lord's doing that with us and we won't humble ourselves, I don't think there's any reason why us human parents don't do the same. And be creative with what that looks like. Did you remember both your points?
Yeah.
You got it. Okay. Any other questions? Maybe what we should do is put some questions in that we always wish people would ask, but don't. Because I have a couple. I really wish people would ask certain questions. Oh, good.
Oh, there's some more back.
Wait, kids, get your money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if I'm on topic or not, but just curious, if you have a child who had a very strong upbringing in faith and experienced a lot of trials and tests in their life, what do you do when you find out that child feels like they want to be distant from the Lord because they don't want to endure any more trials and tests, that they start to kind of barricade themselves from Him? Kind of like maybe they lost their faith because they don't feel like their prayers have been heard. And they've been hurt by that. You know, you try to explain to your children how, you know, the Lord did bless them and did answer some prayers, just about His timing. But how do you restore that? How do you give them hope? How do you bring them back? How do you motivate them? What kind of things can we say as parents to give them examples of how, in addition to what we've already told them, of the things the Lord's done for us?
Yep.
I would say if it's an adult child, then you almost have to just continue to be an example, continue to encourage the best way that you can, that God is God is this. God is good no matter what life may bring us. And also, just sometimes you just have to submit them. And the best thing you can do is pray for your adult kids that the Lord brings, and teenagers. Yeah, even then, I think the best thing that you can do is pray for them and their walk with the Lord. That way it becomes their walk and not out of something that you're trying to even push them into, is what I found is the best.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard sometimes whenever you're not seeing what you know is on the inside of them and what even used to be there. Maybe it's not now. But just trusting the Lord is the best thing.
Two things I thought about when you asked the question. Number one, I think we need to help our kids realize that God doesn't test us. I don't believe that that's in the Lord's heart, to test us, to see how we'll do, or to see what we'll decide. I think He already knows those things. So I don't understand the test unless there's some kind of weird, it's to help us to see ourselves. But I still don't agree with that mentality. So the first thing is I want to make sure that they're not blaming the Lord for what's going on in their lives. I said this in the financial class, the last financial class we had, and I think it's really important. The thief in John 10 and the devourer in Malachi is not the devil. It's really important for us to understand. Both the devourer and the thief are human. So when he says that, tithe so that rebukes the devourer, he's actually talking about how when you give, your generosity rebukes the fool that chews up your money unnecessarily inside of you. And the thief in John 10 is those who try to create another way to God or to heaven other than Jesus. So for me, I'm just not of the opinion that the Lord's testing us. I think the Lord is creating a scenario where we see ourselves as we really are. And sometimes, in fact, many times, I don't think prayer is about getting an answer. I think prayer is about finding out His heart. So I would change the mindset, if you can, or at least encourage the mindset shift, that prayer is whatever I ask for, the Lord needs to do. 2, I pray to have His heart. And I can tell you so many times I prayed to have the Lord's heart and it changed what I was going to pray. Because I recognized His perspective was so radically higher and thereby different than mine. I wanted things out of my way, or I wanted things in my hand because I thought I needed them out of the way or I needed them in my life. And too often I would finally have the perspective of heaven, oftentimes after the fact, and realize I didn't need it or it should have stayed. So in both cases, oftentimes the problems and trials in our lives are us getting in our own way. Mindset shifts, challenges, that sort of thing. That's me. I need to change. I need to change my perspective of myself, of others, of the Lord. And when I do that, most of the time, better things start happening to me. The changes that really need to happen are in here. They're not me trying to change the mind of God. It's actually me trying to change my own mind. Prayer has changed my mind much more than anybody else's. And the other thing is, if there is any kind of blaming of God because of things that have not gone well, I would shift that from being God did this or God didn't do this to what could. Yeah, I mean, we reap what we sow.
Right.
Our prayers will not change that law. We will reap what we sow. That's a purposeful learning opportunity for us. The Lord will not shift that for us. It's one of the greatest teaching tools we have. You have to reap what you sow, or you will not change. So, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's advice I would give.
Yeah, and our relationship with the Lord, if you can help them to see, is not about even them. Like, it's not about them getting their prayers answered by God. That we start out maybe sometimes like that in our level of relationship, but it's beyond that. Help them to see deeper. I don't love the Lord because He answers my prayers and gives me what I ask for. And just like my relationship with other people, it's not what I can get out of it. It's deeper. So this commitment is what you want them to kind of see. Like, are you giving up too easy on God? Maybe that kind of thing.
That's good.
And kind of get them to see Him as a person again and see, well, how do you think He feels and things like that. That might help.
So what happens there, because your ultimate question was when those walls start going up and the distance starts being created, it's really hard to not want to fill that gap for them. And I think what I hear Dawn saying is don't fill that gap. Either themselves or the Lord fills that gap. Just become that praying mom all over again. That you already are. You already are. That's what I'm saying. You double down, triple down, all over again. Pray for the Lord to fill that space. Yeah. Good question. Want to take one from here? I'm going to take one that you can answer. Okay. Yeah, I like this one. Thank you. How do you approach how your daughters dress? Maybe it was never an issue, but currently in my house, this is not really an issue. But when I look at pop culture and what seems normal, I can see myself fighting with my girls in the future about things like prom dresses, bathing suits, skirt lengths, tight yoga pants, etc. My heart is to protect them from Thank you. Pervy boys. And girls for that matter. It's true.
Yeah.
But I'm learning dictatorial control is not how God fathers us. What do you think? So, and I also I asked this question to my girls too. So I told them that they should speak up here too, because we did some stuff. You want to talk about that a little bit? This is one we actually did discuss a little bit in the kitchen.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, the hard part is it's with girls. I mean, you don't have to worry about that with boys as much. And why is that? And that was part of the issue. Like, why do guys not have to worry about what they wear?
What about guys? Don't we have to worry about that?
Or the girls were like, why don't guys have to worry about that? We can't dress how we want. And unfortunately, it's that's the way it is. So, yeah, for us, it was, okay, it comes in stages, obviously, where the child gets more say than us as parents. So I would say initially, like, make that, for us, I think the line was, like, in proportion to where their age was, maybe. Like, I don't know. This is a hard one.
Yeah.
This is.
Well, let me start a little bit. Before there's ever clothing to talk about, I think there's valuing your body. So while they're young, you start talking to them about the value of their body and how really this body one day, and you know this goes to another question a little bit later on, this body one day is going to be for one specific man. And in the meantime, it's not for the rest of mankind to see and experience. So if you start teaching them now to treasure what they have, you don't walk around with all your money hanging out of your pockets, do you? No, you don't walk around telling everybody how much stock you have in a company or how big your house is. So why would you do that with your own body? So if you first start to value that which is valuable, then they'll realize it's not for everyone to know and see and experience. They'll start to appreciate and value it and not recognize it as something that gets people's attention. Some people will drive the super fancy car and wear the nice big ring and wear all their nicest shoes so that everybody thinks a certain thing. But if you have a value in who you are that goes beyond what you have, because literally we have our body. Okay? So those breasts and those legs and that nice butt and all that kind of stuff, that's what you have. But it's not who you are. So the earlier our girls recognize that their value has nothing to do with those assets, the less they'll feel like they have to flaunt them. And then discussions about clothes almost become secondary discussions because the primary discussion was had already, which is these are valuable things not meant for the general public to experience. So, you want to say more to that? I can get specific then, because he actually brought up yoga pants.
Okay.
So,
yeah, and you might also experience that, like, I've also been aware of, like, if my kids were trying too hard the other way. Does that make sense? To be, like, downplay who they were created to be, if that makes sense. So I've also been sensitive to that, just that they were in a healthy self-image is what you really want. Yeah.
Like, I remember, like, all three of our girls, like, I don't know if it's still that way, but when our girls were in high school, like, sweatpants and hoodies seemed to be, like, the main thing most kids wore in school. And I just don't ever remember that when I was in school. Like, we didn't dress that way. I don't know what happened. But our girls were always like, we want to look nice. Like, they rarely wore sweatpants and a hoodie to school. And it was never because Mom and I said, oh, no, that's not how our girls are going to dress. I think they had a healthy self-image. So they were able to be feminine without being, what's the other word? Flirtatious, or there's probably worse words that you could use. But our girls learned how to be feminine. They were able to dress nice. They were able to wear clothes that made them look like a woman. It would portray femininity without portraying I'm a whore. I'm being real with you. And so I think there's power in femininity and there's cheapness in how much I can show. And our girls, I think because we were very much focused, that's why all of our discipline was focused on identity, not behavior. Because I wanted them at a young age to recognize the value of their identity. If they value their identity in the 8, 9, 10-year-olds, I can promise you they're going to value it even more as they really begin to understand it themselves. So as a result, yeah, I mean, they wore nice clothes. They even wore tight pants. Like the yoga pants were something. Every once in a while, I caught them trying to sneak out of the house without their butt covered. But that was a rule I had. I said, look, if you're going to wear yoga pants, there better be something long over top of that thing. That's just Dad. I'm just to tell you right now. I won't say what I was thinking. But that's going to be covered. And sometimes I had us storming back upstairs. But for the most part, they knew that ahead of time, and they didn't do it.
And when they did try to do it, we just had to make sure. Sometimes we would catch after a day of school. It wasn't very often, but on occasion.
Yeah.
Or if we could catch it before they left the house. But and the other thing is for moms to, be a good example in this. Don't make it a double standard where, one thing's acceptable because I'm already married. Just be a good example.
Here's something else. And again, this is Mark's opinion, okay? I try to be really clear when I say Mark's opinion. So this is Mark's opinion. I wonder sometimes if moms either go to one of two extremes. I'm saying specifically moms because it's the mom's job to kind of create the feminine culture that our girls can grow up in. Either they kind of do what Dawn said, where, hey, you got to set the good example. Don't be freewheeling it now because you're married. You can wear whatever you want. Or don't be super sloppy all the time because you're already married. Still dress like a woman. Be feminine. Embrace your femininity. Yes, you're a mom and you've got kids hanging all over you. That is not an excuse to not dress nice and to not carry yourself with femininity. I think sometimes our girls will see our moms and without realizing it, they'll almost want to be like, well, I don't want to be like that, so they'll do the opposite. And I think sometimes we create what we're not trying to be without even realizing it. So I think Dawn had for the most part, at home sometimes I see the same pair of sweatpants. But other than that, that's cool because you're at home. But when she goes out, I've never seen Dawn go out in sweatpants to Walmart or something like that, or dressed down. She always changes her clothes and looks like a lady when she walks out the door. And I think our girls caught that over time. And I think that's appropriate and wise. Again, it's Mark's opinion, but I think it's right. Oh, when it comes to bathing suits, I think it's okay for girls to wear bikinis on the beach. The beach is a bikini, but when you get ready to walk off the beach, throw something on over top of that. So it's just Mark. I didn't think that was a big deal on the beach. They would swim, they would have fun. As Megan said tonight, how else is a girl going to get a tan? That kind of thing. I like that. That was good. But as soon as it's time to go walk around, I'd like you to throw something on. I think that's appropriate. I think a lot of girls will take that opportunity to go places where that's probably not appropriate, and they're doing it for one reason. They want to get guys' attention. And here's something else. I do not believe girls ought to not dress like girls because they're afraid to arouse guys. That is not a girl's responsibility. That's a guy's responsibility. So fathers and moms, we need to train our boys to not look at women as, sorry. Please do not get distracted by that. We have to train our boys to not look at ladies as commodities. They're as valuable as us fathers are trying to tell our daughters they are. So I do not put it on my girls to not make boys lust. That's a boy's responsibility to not lust. So I'm going to train Anderson like that already. So, how's that feel? Is that a good, helpful?
I'm glad to hear, because I'm envisioning a battle of 16, 17-year-old girl wanting to go to prom, and it sounds like you would pull the dad card and say, I'm not paying for that dress. Sorry.
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay.
But you know what's beautiful? They never did it. Because I think we started younger, and it wasn't even about clothes. It was about who they are. It was about valuing what they had and all of that. They never brought home a dress that I was like, ooh. Maybe an extra layer of clothes sometimes was suggested highly, strongly. But other than that. Hey, girls, do you want to say anything to this? I want to give you the opportunity. Maddie, you weren't in the room when we were talking about this earlier. Do you feel good about what we said? Meg? Yep. Lauren, do you want to say any more? I know you do. Come on up. I can see it in your face.
Yeah, is she coming?
I don't know. Are you coming? Yeah, okay. See, like, shoulders are okay. See how that works?
I was just going to say that after a while, there are
Shoulders
times...
and knees.
Yeah, I do wear this. We wear this a lot. This. I don't think it's inappropriate. At certain points, as a woman, I feel uncomfortable in certain clothes. But I don't know. That may be a result of how you raised us, too. But, I'll put something on and I'll be like, I'd be uncomfortable in this in a public setting. Not based on others' opinions, but I would just be uncomfortable in this. I don't feel like anybody else needs to see this anyway. That sort of thing. Or I think about what my mom would wear. I've done that. Now at the gym, I do wear yoga pants without covering my butt. We all do. But it's the gym. It's different, I feel like. All three of us do.
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah. Don't put me on the spot. I have a question.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time where you were feeling a little insecure about yourself
Yes.
and you felt like maybe dressing a little...
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, in the middle of it, I recognized it. And then I know Mom's told me about it before, but it feels wrong. It didn't feel right. Because I think that a girl should feel free to express herself in the way she dresses, but she has to do it for the right reason. If she's doing it to get attention, I don't think that's doing it to express yourself. I do think you should think twice about it. Now, I forget the other way I was thinking about it. Now, if it is the guy's fault if he does something stupid. I just think that's how I feel about it. You said, pervy boys. There are times when girls are dressed completely fully covered and there's nothing sexual about it, and guys are still gonna do whatever they want to do. Now, of course, that's not always the case, and sometimes the way girls dress does draw it, but I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it's really on us parents to sense the current emotional, even spiritual state of our kids. And if they are suffering from insecurity, they will act that out. They will do something. And if we can catch that ahead of time, be careful not to address the low-cut shirt. Address what's really going on. There's something else going on, not just poor clothes choice. It's usually they're not feeling good about themselves today. Or there's a boy out there who's tempting them. You can talk about those things. And oftentimes it's insecurity in ladies that causes that to take place.
Yeah, so those were a lot of our clothes conversations. It would go deeper than the clothes, talking about insecurities and also talking about, everyone else wears this. And so that's another opportunity for a conversation.
Yeah.
Do you
think it goes both ways, though? Should guys wear shirts? The business I have, we get a lot of men come in with their shirts off. It bothers me because my daughter sees it. But do we think we should encourage our kids, our sons, to wear shirts? just like we encourage our daughters to be covered, should we encourage our sons to be covered?
Absolutely, yes. I
That's
think
why,
so.
I mean, I'm just asking,
Yeah.
I'm curious, because it bothers me, because the customers come in, because they're hot, they're outside, they don't have their shirts on, and it's like, come on, can't you?
I actually think that's just respectful.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. The question was about daughters, that's why we're addressing
Yeah.
daughters. And usually it's not an issue for the most part, but you're absolutely right. I think it's just respectful. Dude, throw a shirt on. Especially if you have a six-pack, definitely throw a shirt on. Because that's just rude.
I wanted to say something really quick. It doesn't have to do with clothes, but it's like in all parenting aspects. There were times when us as kids would get frustrated that little things that we did would blow up into this, like, what's going on with you sort of thing. Like, why does the world have to end every time that we do something wrong? Like that sort of thing. But I was literally just realized it. Like, there's a purpose to that. So I think, well, it's just because every time I will do something that I'm like, oh, wait, maybe that's not like in line. It's because of those moments. Like if I do something, I'll be like, well, why did I do that? You know? But that's as a result of what they did. It was kind of annoying. But that doesn't have to do with clothing. But as parents, I think that's a wise thing to do.
Yeah. Bring that up here to Mary. While you're doing that, parents, if your kids don't think you're annoying at some point, you're not doing your job. I mean it. If you're always the cool parent, something is wrong. I'm serious, guys, okay? You should not be the cool person. That's always your kid's friend and buddy. That means you're not drawing lines enough for your kids. You guys all right?
So one thing that really helped me make decisions, well, I don't know if it helped me make decisions so much as to what I would wear, but like how I would wear something, because I think that, I guess what we were saying is, you know, some women can be dressed completely modestly, but they can be acting very scandalously, so I thought that would fit in good as to, like, I mean, someone could accuse a girl who's dressed completely fine of being scandalous. Well, I mean, they could be because of their attitude and the way they, like, flaunt would be one of the words I would use, flaunt their bodies. So I think that just kind of fits into the topic, too, is, like, seeing how your kids are wearing what they're wearing, and maybe that'll help you understand what's really going on, too. I don't know. I don't have kids, but...
Yep. Yeah, it's the spirit of a thing that's more important than the thing.
That's right, yeah.
So the spirit of our child is more important than even what they're wearing. You're absolutely right. Yep. Did you have something on the clothing thing that you wanted to share?
It was not on clothing.
It was what?
It was not on the clothing.
Okay. Did you want to ask a question? Yeah? Go ahead.
What do you do when you have two children? Well, like y'all know, I have 6, so I have 2 of them that, I don't know, they don't communicate very well. They're not close. There's one that wishes they were closer, and the other one's just like, eh. Is there anything as parents we should be doing to reinforce that bond or help them grow closer together?
How old are they?
14 and 15, almost 16. When they tend to favor another child, you know, have a strong relationship with one child and the other ones are just kind of, you know.
Yeah. The first thing I'm thinking about is similar to Dawn's answer. I wouldn't try to force the issue too much there. Sometimes they just need to grow out of some things. They also might be very similar as far as like personalities go and maybe the way they see life and things like that. So sometimes when there's a lot of particular friction between two children, it's often because there's a lot of similarities between them, or they want a lot of the same things and they feel like one gets it more than the other or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of things there, but my first thought is don't force it. Let them kind of grow through that. As they get to an age where you feel like, okay, this is getting worse, not better, address it individually in each one, not together. Don't put any one on the spot in front of the other one. But address it individually. Just say, hey, what's going on there? Have a real, genuine conversation with them. What's the situation? They'll tell you exactly how they feel. I can tell you they will. But the value is they can share freely without the other person there with you. And then as their mom, because you're the mom of both, you have the ability to show them the mother's heart about each one of them. Because they don't have the mother's heart. They don't have this, I love them no matter what feeling that you have. You can give them an aspect and a perspective of the other that they don't have. And I would challenge you to do that more consistently. Say any of that? That's good. Okay. This one here. Want to read that one?
Okay, the question is, when parenting the hearts of our children and focusing more on identity than behavior, what do we do when it gets messy? And what to do in the meantime while growth is in process and change doesn't happen overnight? And when the negative behaviors of one or some begin to affect the identities of the other children negatively over time? A couple parts to that one.
Yeah. First thing I want to start with, because I read that question earlier. I'm a firm believer that discipline and correction should happen based upon identity, not behavior. And when I've been saying this for many years. Those of you that have been around me for a long time know I've been saying that for years. But there could be like this mindset shift that happens when you hear that there's therefore then not a lot of correction. That's not true. There's plenty of discipline and correction in my house. There is. But it's not based on correcting behavior. It's based on reminding our children of who they are. Ongoingly. So the spirit of the correction or discipline or discussion is different. I don't just want my kids to act better so there's peace in the house. I don't just want them to behave so that they don't get arrested someday. I know it's an extreme, but you get my point. I want them to act the way they were created to act because they know who they were created to be. So I don't want robots. And I mean this with all sincerity. I think there's a lot of human beings, full-grown adults, who don't do what's wrong because they don't want to get in trouble. Still to this day. And I think that's really bad motivation. If we don't do things so we don't get in trouble, we're missing the grander point of being a human being. That's law. And I can promise you, anyone who lives by law does not enjoy life nearly as much as someone who does what is right because it's awesome. It really is awesome to do what is right. It is fulfilling. It brings joy. It brings peace. All those things. So I would much rather have my children enjoy what is right. Honestly, that takes more discipline and correction. Because it takes a completely, I can tell you, school isn't that way. For the most part, school is all about just making sure you get the information you need to get and be quiet and don't hurt anybody else while we're teaching you. So it's all behavior driven. And the results are they have to get understanding of their identity and the beauty of that somewhere else. I mean, how many teachers I got in the room? I know I got Matt here. Anybody else in the school district on a regular basis? How much do we talk about the identity of children in school? Like who they really are. Is there a lot of talk about that I'm not aware of? Sorry? Okay, so there's probably more of that. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. I would love to see that in all the classrooms, but I would say it's probably not the case or not the norm, is it? No, it isn't. It's unfortunate. It hurts my heart that way. So it's got to happen at home. So it's going to get messy, especially when our kids are younger. They will not understand discipline based on identity. They're not. And so I didn't bother when they were 5 and 6 years old to discipline based on identity. I just needed them to know that the stove was hot, and if you cross the street without looking both ways, you will get hit by a car. Okay? Basically, they need to stay alive till they get to the place where you can start talking about identity. Keep them alive long enough to have the really important discussions. And then there's the interchange between them. And I think that's where it gets, right? They talked about the messiness. When it gets messy. And in the meantime,
While growth is in process.
when the negative behaviors of one begin to affect the identities of other children. Oftentimes, it's younger children's behavior affecting older children who are now... When you have a house where you're disciplining some on behavior because they're too young to understand identity, and you're disciplining others based upon identity because they're old enough to understand it, there is where you're going to have conflict. Because there's two completely different spirits going on there. And that's when it's really important to be intentional with your older ones and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. Right now, your 4-year-old or 5-year-old brother does not understand. That's why corporal punishment is still necessary, or whatever it is that you're believing to do is necessary. And then for you, because you're 10, 11, and 12 years old, I'm starting to have different discussions with you. I said this in the very first time we talked about this at the beginning of March. Being a parent takes an awful lot of investment. And you add jobs, and you add extracurricular activities, and you add all this stuff on top of it. And before long, the most important parts about being a parent get lost in just trying to survive your day. And we lose our intentionality. I think it's actually very accurate for parents to strongly consider removing extracurricular activities for both parent and child in those developmental years. I do not think a whole bunch of sports and a whole bunch of activities for your kids is healthy. I don't. I think 1 or 2 in a year are good. Give them an outlet. Give them something to express themselves and have fun outside of your family. Nothing wrong with that. But if the family's activities begin to surround the child's activities, they become the center of the family. They become the sun that the planets revolve around. And before long, they have a false sense of self-worth, not a strong, healthy sense of self-worth. And then when they get out of the real world, they realize, oh my gosh, I thought the whole world revolved around me. And it doesn't. So, swinging that back to this question. It does get messy, and you will not do it right all the time. You will mess up. You will make a lot of bad choices. You'll discipline out of anger, which, by the way, I don't think is bad all the time. The Lord disciplined out of anger in the Bible. I knew we grew up with this horrible, false condemnation that we could never get mad at our kids, and if we did, we could never say a word to them until we weren't mad anymore. I would hardly ever say anything to them. I'm being real. No, my kids heard from me when I was angry. Otherwise, what the heck's the wrath of God? What's the point of it? Our children need to see us angry. They need to understand when what they do and how they've done it or what they've said angers us and why it angers us. But we need to take the time to explain it. We need to come back even after we're angry. And if we have to repent, repent. What a wonderful teaching opportunity for parents to repent to their children. I'm not saying make mistakes just so you can repent. I'm not saying that. But if you get the chance to repent before your kids, it's unbelievable. What a great thing.
They really appreciate it.
They do. They love it.
They're touched by it.
But there was another part here. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to go back to the part. Okay, so, and what do you do in the meantime while the growth is in process?
Right.
And change doesn't happen overnight, and when the negative behaviors of one or more begins to affect the identities of the other children negatively over time. Well, what I just want to say to that is some of the processes have been a little prolonged in our family with our kids. I wish they would have gotten it sooner and even seen how it was affecting others. And as much as we tried to correct it, you can't force them to change or see these things. And we exhausted every possible thing, but it would negatively affect another family member. So there again, you just have to speak to the child and the other child maybe and try to explain to them. And they're probably, even young ones, really see. How many people have seen their kids that just have the wisdom of the Lord already at a very young age? You know, you can have real deep conversations with your kids. So, yeah, just explain that maybe this person is going through a process and how, I mean, it will try not to affect them, but it does, and that's very heartbreaking as a parent whenever you see it affecting a someone, an innocent one negatively. But really, you just have to trust, and the grace of the Father is really important there too.
Yeah. You know, we don't stop feeding our kids because we don't think it's not working. Because you feed them in the morning, and by lunchtime they're hungry again. And then you have to feed them often, like in between. Like they're hungry an hour or two later, and you're just like, if the fact that your kids are hungry doesn't mean your food isn't working. So I say that to say, you will have to say things and do things with your children so many times before it finally sinks in. Sometimes years and years. There were different things we had to tell each one of those girls back there. I could tell you right now what we had to say to Lauren, what we had to say to Maddie, and what we had to say to Megan. They could probably tell you. I'll use one example. I constantly had to tell one of them, you love other people. You value them more than yourself. Over and over and over and over again. I must have said those two sentences hundreds upon hundreds of times. And it's finally sunk in. It took years. And it's working. And you will have to repeat yourself. You will have to do it again the next day. And it will not, you won't finally get to the point, look, it's not working, I ought to quit. No, that double down right then. That's what I'm saying. This parenting thing is about investment. It's about time. It's about commitment. You don't get to give up. You don't get to. You have to keep doing it. I'm even willing to say when they're adults, keep saying it. Keep telling them. Because when they're adults, hey, how many of us struggle with something as adults? I just want to make sure I'm in the right room. And when mom and dad call you up and remind you who you are, does it have an impact? Of course it does. So don't give up on that. Especially when it's messy, especially when it doesn't seem like it's working. When it doesn't seem like it's working, keep doing it. I mean it. Yeah. Let's go to something different here. How about this one?
Okay.
Okay, so someone asked the question, which is a powerful question, about suggestions for parenting children in a divorce situation. And Dawn and I have had to talk with multiple couples that aren't couples anymore about how to do this with their children. The very first thing, and a lot of these things are going to say, oh yeah, I knew that. But again, back to the same thing, over and over and over again. Always speak well of the other one. Always speak well of the other parent or the step parent or whatever else that might be involved. And if you know something is really off and it's really frustrating, it seems like the right thing to do to tell the child this is wrong and they shouldn't be doing this. That first conversation has to be had with the other parent. Please do not have conversations with your children until you've had them with the other spouse. Really, really important. And then as that continues, if it continues and that doesn't change, and the children is of age of reasoning, like if it's a 3 or 4 year old child, that is not a conversation you have. You can just say, look, in this house we do it this way. In his or her house they might do it this way, but in our house we do it this way. You're just going to have to learn, because in different environments where you go as an adult, you act one way in one place and it's acceptable, you go to another place, it's not acceptable. So it's all about flexibility. And the sooner our children learn flexibility, the better. So that's a great opportunity to learn flexibility. Something else is, like, I believe this even with children of parents that are together. Learn to share your children. Like, here's one of the questions I wish people would ask me. Especially the really little ones. Like, I think we're too protective of our little ones. Like, they are so, like, I think I kind of said this in one of the messages, but they're so resilient. And when they're really young and really helpless, and you think that they need you all the time, they really don't. They really don't. And I think moms specifically feel like they need to completely forget their identity as a woman and as a daughter and as a wife because they have this little newborn, and you just don't have to. This little person does not have to take over your life. I know it feels that way. It doesn't have to. There are other people in your life that would love to help. And as you do that, you're sharing. You're realizing at their very young age that they're meant for the world. And a divorce situation, I think, is a great opportunity for that, of learning as a parent to share your children. Dawn and I came to this resolution early in our lives that our kids were going to be the world's kids. They were starting to go to the nations. How old were you guys when you went on the mission field? 12 or 13, right? And it was in their hearts even before that, and we were just like, at least wait till 12, please. And they went without us. Didn't you go without us a bunch too? Yeah, half the time or more, right? Yeah. The earlier we learn to share our kids, I think there's something that happens on the inside of them, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, where the Lord becomes their father early. And we give them the opportunity to experience life outside of us in a way that, I'm not saying just pawing them off on everybody and, who has our kid today? I don't know, do you know? I'm not talking about that. Be aware of who has your children and where they are, but share them, be open. I mean, some of the things I'm hearing parents do or don't do with their kids because they're afraid of this or that. I mean, we just never lived that. I don't remember us doing that. Like, and they're really great kids. I mean, yeah, they have their quirks. But they're healthy. Like physically, they don't get sick a lot. I don't know. Just share your kids. And divorce situation is just an opportunity to share your kids. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get too specific or it's going to feel like I'm talking about people. I don't want to do that. You want to say anything about the divorce thing?
I think just remembering that what the goal is the children, and growing them up in the best environments, as you know how. And you still have to work as a team. Mom and dad still have to work as a team. So the more that they're able to set other things aside and just make kids a priority in those situations, I've seen the healthiest situations in that, when that's the case.
Something else, don't ever use the kid as a pawn. Your child is not a bartering tool. So in a divorce situation, if you do this, then I'm taking your kid. Or if you do this, then I'm going to fight for this, or something like that. The children will feel that and experience that, and they'll use that to their advantage. They will. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When the parent is not being the parent in a divorce situation like that, so when the kids go over that and they don't really want to be around that person.
Well, unless there's some kind of custody agreement where they have to be, you leave it up to the child's choice. You don't force that issue. But I think we can continue to practice speaking well of them. Hey, you're always going to have your father in your life, or you're always going to have your mother in your life. You ought to try to find things about them. Try to, They might not want to spend time with you, but hey, you're 14. Ask them if they want to do something with you. You know, turn it around. And I think our children at a young age should really understand that it shouldn't always be the parent that has to initiate relationship. The child can and should initiate relationship. Like I said, I think I waited way too long in life to start initiating real relationship with my parents. I wish I would have started sooner. So I think it's an opportunity to teach our kids to initiate relationship. I got a question, right? Do you want to use the microphone?
No, I got a big mouth. I think I can.
It's good for the recording.
Oh, okay. So this doesn't have anything to do with like divorced parents, but about kids being shared. You say sharing your what if you want to share them and they don't want to be shared? Like you want to put them into situations that you think will help them develop and mature and just, you know, that'll help them, and they don't want to be in those situations, and they push back, and then it's just a struggle. Like, how do you know what battles to... You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Can I ask age again?
Almost teenager.
Okay. Yeah, I would force that a little bit. I would create situations where you're just not there, and you're just going to have to make that thing happen. I hate to do that, but if the situation is becoming a teenager and they don't want to ever participate in anything outside the family, I would kind of force that issue.
Like even sometimes it's with the family. Like doesn't want to participate in stuff with the family. Just wants to be kind of secluded and
hiding out.
Yep.
Okay. Would there be any electronics involved?
Yes.
Okay. So we had to do this a little bit with Anderson. It took like 2 weeks, and then he was managing himself really well. He really liked Madden, the game Madden, and I mean, I don't want to tell stories on it, but it got pretty bad. Like he wouldn't put the thing down. And so after about 2 weeks, we started saying, okay, 1 game a day, like one actual football game a day, and then you put it down. And for about a week or two, that was, you know, all right, your game's over. And after 2 weeks, he was managing it himself. Like, I think we need to take those away. I do not think electronics are healthy on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis for our children. I was just in a house yesterday where the parents were in a really good situation where after like 2 hours of being there, the child then asked for the iPad. And I actually forgot about iPads for 2 hours. Like I didn't even know they existed until the child asked for it. And then the child sat down, watched one show, and the child was 4 years old. So if we were not monitoring well the electronics usage at a young age, it's going to be a lot harder at an almost teenage age to begin to remove those out of the situation. But that's a start. The start is to remove the electronics from being a regular go-to for them. What electronics do is it makes our world very small. It shrinks our world and makes us only ourselves with that world, whether it's a game or whether it's other people they're talking to on there or whatever it might be. It shrinks our world. And what they're afraid of is their world opening up again. Again, it's not about the electronic as much as about my world's too small. And so that's why I'm saying to you, slowly but intentionally increase the size of their world. And first of all, what you do is you take away the door that makes their world small. So I hate to say it, and I'm not a big fan of taking away things, but our taking away things had more to do with something else other than the thing. But in this case, the thing is keeping the world small, and it's an easy go-to. So I would start there. Create other circumstances where activity, relationship, life in general has to happen without whatever this particular electronic thing is. Start there. And it'll take a little while, and they'll feel uneasy, and they'll be nervous, and they'll just sit there like a bump on a log, and frustrated and angry and all that kind of stuff. And you will have to be consistent about that. And eventually, the light will start to come in to a very small world. Mm-hmm. I would try that first. Do you have thoughts?
No, that's really good.
Yeah? Did you want to reply to any of that, or?
I think, you know, with a teenager, and I mean, what other options once you take that, like that outlet away? I think we struggle with giving him other options. Like, okay, so now what do I do? You know,
Well-
especially now with it being wintertime, like what other options?
Okay, so other options, like, all right, this is gonna feel like it's going off track, but I promise you I'm gonna bring it back. Most people will tell you, if there are any counselors in the room, we got some counselors in the room, therapists, counselors type people. It's pretty much now an accepted, at least belief, I won't say fact, that the solution to almost every addictive behavior is close, intimate, personal relationships. The reason why most people have gravitated towards some kind of addictive behavior is because of a lack of close, intimate, open relationships where we were able to communicate in an open way. I was able to talk to this person about whatever. Like, I don't have those kind of relationships in my life. So as a result, I went to something that completely understood me and expected nothing of me. And a lot of addictive behavior is that way. So I would replace that thing with relationship, not with another activity or with some kind of game or some kind of sport or anything like that. I would replace it with relationship, and I would start with you two. I would start with continuing to engage. And I can promise you, there will be a season, and it'll feel really long, where you will have one-way discussions.
What's happening?
It's happening. Keep
Yeah.
having them. I mean it, keep having them. Because what you're communicating is, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and I am open, and I am interested. Children need to know, even if they're saying to you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to talk to you, they still need to know that we're interested, and we're here, and we're open, and we're not going away. So, you want to have that thing for the hour like we agreed to? Then let's have a real discussion. And before long, we're going to begin to normalize real relationship again. And it will take time. But it will be worth it. And I think it goes back to that consistency. I'm not giving up. I'm going to repeat myself over and over again. Like Megan will tell you, or Anderson will tell you, because they're the most ones that were still in high school and middle school. I do not take fine or what did you learn today, nothing, as an answer. Because like I said before, if nothing is a regular answer to what you learned today, I'm going to have a discussion with the teacher. And then my kids are going to start telling me what they learned today because they don't want to hear that from their teacher. So I just regularly talk about it. And eventually, they want to talk. Honestly, every one of your children that don't talk really do want to. They just don't know how. And that's why our communication becomes such a bridge and example on how to communicate. So, communicate. Keep asking questions. The one-word answers turn into two-word answers, turn into sentences, turn into paragraphs. They do. Some of the richest discussions Dawn and I now have for the rest of our lives are happening with our children. It does happen. And we've also had the season of, fine. Yes. I know. We've all had them. And we hardly have any of them anymore. Sometimes that's your spouse too. But we've all had those discussions with all of our children, and now every single one of them, we have long question and answer, both ways conversations. But it starts with the hard ones of having the conversation where there's not much answer in return. But please, and I think this is really important advice, do not replace the game with another activity. Because eventually parents, adults, will only find themselves in an activity or in serving or in doing something. And before long, they'll have to perform to feel like a human being. And we don't want that. The greatest opportunity to feel like a real human being is in relationship. That's where we have to find it. You want to add something? Absolutely.
You kind of said it, but I think it's important that we help our kids learn how to have conversation because they don't know how. So sometimes the way we craft our questions we can either create a question that allows them to give a one-word answer, or we can ask a question that requires more of a story. And I know one of the things I did with my kids when they were little is we talked about conversations. I don't even know where I heard this, but conversations like in the sense of a tennis match. So like when I hit the ball to you, I'm sending the ball to you, like asking a question, but your answer can either end the volley, is that what it's called? Or it can send the ball back to me to like ask something of me. And we would kind of play that game so that even if they gave a 3-sentence answer, there was something in their reply that required me to respond to it. It wasn't the end of the conversation. And that was really helpful, just like teaching them how to have dialogue and how to have conversation. And I think even recently I've had a few conversations with my kids about, social situations where they feel awkward or they just don't know and they freeze and they don't know how to have. So like just some like having discussions about like what are some things that you could think about ahead of time that you might want to talk about with this person, or like like what have you been, I don't know, whatever it is, like what are things that have been interesting you lately? Think about this person, like what do you know about them where you might make a connection, and helping them to kind of think ahead and about the group they're going to be in or the people they're going to be with, and it starts to ease some of that pressure of being around a group of people, because that can be overwhelming if they just freeze up with I don't know what to do, instead of like helping them to figure it out.
That's very good. Anderson and I were driving together. We went down and saw Duke play basketball a couple weeks ago or a month ago. And I did this thing with him in the car where, okay, I'm going to ask you a question about you, and then you can ask me a question about me. I was like, oh, what are you going to ask me? And at first he was like, I don't want to do this. So I had to ask like 3 or 4 questions about him before he asked me a question about me. And before long, it was 30, 45 minutes. He asked some pretty cool questions about me. And questions I didn't even thought about for a really long time about myself that I got to tell him. So you can do fun things like that. That reminded me of the volley that Leslie just described. Like, you got to ask me a question, now I've asked you a question. So you can do that. It's just be creative, but it takes intentionality. It does, to have those conversations, and especially if they're not answering. But have it anyway. And I think she makes an important point. Ask questions that require them to throw the ball back to you so you can ask another question. So.
Something my parents did that I really appreciated is our family was often very busy, as most families are, but one thing that we always, we worked a lot together, and that created a lot of opportunity for conversations just because we were together. Our farm environment didn't allow for a lot of extracurriculars, so we weren't allowed to do sports and stuff. There was no time. So that was how we spent a lot of our time, working alongside each other. And something about that was so cool because I was often doing the same thing my parents were doing at a smaller or reduced level, and then it would sort of indirectly challenge me, like, can I keep up? Can I do it as well as they do? Can I try something bigger or harder? And it was just so good because over time, it built me working alongside my parents, and it was our conversations together. It really did produce some really cool environments. So I think it's good to clean the kitchen together or do basic things together. I think sometimes if your hands are distracted, it's easier to engage in a conversation too, like the pressure's sort of off. So.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say to this, because I have a couple other questions we want to hit, and I know it's getting late. Create environments where the family's all together in the house often. I love that. And my kids actually love it too. It creates, and especially as they grow into getting into the teenage years, and there's all kinds of emotions and feelings going on. It's so messy, and sometimes it's kind of ugly, but it's so fun because it's real. And you get real relationship, you get real interaction, you get a lot of hard, but you get a lot of good. And I want to tell you, as those feelings start rushing around in there and they start feeling free to talk from those things, they're going to talk a lot. And they're going to have some intensity and some emotion behind what they're saying. And if the other family members are there, oh boy, that's fun. And Dawn and I can tell you, we've had some of the best, we don't call them family meetings. We've had them in the past. We'll gather them all together in the great room and we'll have a family meeting. But most of the time we don't even call it. like I've said many times, our kids don't go to their rooms. Like, we never use that as a punishment. And as a result, they do their homework in the great room where everybody else is. And even when they're not doing their homework, they go where everybody else is. And I'm so thankful for that. And I think it's because we didn't use isolation as a means of creating peace or of discipline or anything like that. We always encouraged oneness. So like, Dawn and I have been in business and we've done rentals and all that kind of thing, and the whole family's involved. There have been many times at FUDs where all 5 of us or 6 of us are working in the restaurant, or all 5 of us are in the house painting or doing something. And I don't know, I think that just creates more opportunity for real conversation to take place. So I encourage that. Okay, a couple other things. This is really good for teenage and even maybe young adults. When you fully trust your teen and then it gets broken, how do you as a parent recover from that? And how do you help your teen also recover and restore the trust? Great question. I think my children's one of the most important things my children need to know is that I believe in them. Even when they're messing up, even when they've really made a bad mistake, they need to know that I still believe in them. In fact, especially when they're making mistakes, they need to know I believe in them. And when they feel believed in, they'll try again. Okay? That's really important. But if we feel like, you really have to bite your tongue on the I told you so's and all the reasons why they shouldn't have done what they did. In most cases, unless they're really seared in their conscience, they already know why they shouldn't have done what they did. If they're raised in a halfway decent environment, they already know that. So don't beat them over the head with why they did what they did was wrong. Instead, encourage them to go out and try again, but be with them in it. So if they've broken trust with you, I think they need to go out and do whatever it is that they were doing before, do it again. But do it with more communication and with more of my presence. Broken trust simply means I need more of you in my life. This is really important. If I don't do what the Lord wants me to do or what He knows is best for me, what I really need is more grace. And grace is the divine empowerment of God in and upon my heart and its reflection in my life. So when I don't do what I'm supposed to do, the Lord pours out more grace on me. Right? Where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. He actually gives me more of Himself when I break covenant or break trust with Him. So breaking trust with my child, or my child breaking trust with me, is a cry for more of me. And you're going to get more of me when you break trust with me. You're going to get more involvement. You're going to have me asking more questions. You're going to have me more present in your life. Because you have not so far displayed that you can carry well this particular time in your life or responsibility or privilege or whatever. So, let's say they went out with their friends and did something that they really weren't supposed to do. And then they come back and they either tell you, which would be really cool, or you find out another way, which isn't so cool. When they're out with their friends the next time, like I have not been of the opinion that all right, that's it, 2 weeks, no friends. I have not been like that. But instead, I will be much more communicative while they're with their friends. And as soon as they get home, we'll be having discussions about that. And again, back to broken trust and building relationship over time. The more relationship we were able to build with our children when they were younger, they were much more open to share when it got older. And they were able to share, look, I did really mess up here. I mean, there's only a few times where we actually caught our kids doing something. For the most part, our kids will actually tell us.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree that I became the annoying parent that asked lots of questions after that trust was broken. So,
yep.
But it wasn't even so much the consequence. That was the consequence. Like,
more
I'm going to, lots of questions.
Yep.
Yeah. Annoyingly.
If you take away, okay, this is Mark and Dawn's opinion, so just deal with this. You can decide for yourselves what you believe is right. If you take away what broke the trust in the first place, you will create secret lives in your children. You will create rebellion. You'll create, well, I'll just do it without telling you. That's the last thing we want. I can promise you it's the last thing we want. We do not want our kids having private lives. We want our kids communicating. We want our kids open. Now, it feels like to you, oh my gosh, are you telling me go ahead and re-give them that privilege? Yes, I am. But I'm telling you to do it with more relationship, with more of you, with being more involved, asking more questions like Dawn said. But if you take that privilege away, they will sneak it some other way. Human beings were created to rebel against any law that's put upon us. So don't create a law or breaking law relationship with your kids. They will rebel. They don't know what else to do. It's human nature to rebel against law. You were not created to live by law.
And you also have to measure where they are with the broken trust. Did it affect them? Was it no big deal to them? You kind of have to measure that as well and know how to respond.
Okay, I know it's 8:30, and if you have to take your kids home or go, or that's all fine, but we have sex questions here. That'll keep you, right? And I want to answer some of these because they're really good. Number one, when do you start talking about sex with your kids? I kind of addressed this in one of the messages. Sex should not be a taboo subject. We should be talking about sex all the time. But the varying or levels or degrees of specificity, you only go there as they get older, obviously. Okay? I think there is an appropriate level of transparency with age. It's really disgusting for me to hear parents, and I could hear them in stores and things like that, talking suggestively and talking sexually with our children when they're way too young to understand it. And before long, it's a norm to say, oh, it's terrible. But like I told you, my children knew at a young age that Dawn and I had sex. Like I told that story about Lauren. It's okay to have them know that mom and dad have sexual activity. It's okay for them to know that. I think it's okay our kids to know at a young age where babies come from. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's the details. It's the specificity that I think can wait until an older age. So we actually started talking about the specificity with our children somewhere in the 11 to 12? 11. Yeah, 11 to 12 age group. And there we talked pretty specifically with them. And pretty much the reason why we did is because we know that they're hearing about it in school. And they're hearing all the ugly, perverted, broken versions of it in school. So we felt it was really important. In fact, I think the first time we actually talked about it with our kids, it was a result of our kids asking questions of what they heard in school. So we knew, oh my gosh, it's time to talk to our kids about this. So we did that early. Yeah, the question here is, especially for children who ask lots of follow-up questions. Anybody have kids like that? Who that one answer isn't good enough, they're going to ask another question. And I really think it's okay to say to our children, that's all you need to know right now. We will tell you more later. As you get older, we'll tell you more. But for now, that's all you need to know. And it'll be good for you right now. And I think that's okay to say to our children. Do you want to say anything to that?
And I think the Hebners mentioned the other day that there was a book that they had. So there's good materials out there if you're struggling. I remember we had a book that was like for younger children explaining it one way, and then you could also use it for older ones to go into further details. So there's lots of good materials out there.
Regularly talk to your children, especially as they get older. So let's say 11 and 12 on. Talk to your children about God's original design for sexual activity. Talk about what God did with Adam and Eve. Talked about what it looks like. Talk about that it was made for marriage. It was made for a man and a woman. It's okay to talk about those things and to be very real with them. And from a young age up, they'll understand. And talk about why sex before marriage isn't healthy and isn't good and really does hurt the relationship more than help it. It's really important for our children at a younger age to know that stuff, even before the opportunities at sexual relationship, 11, 12, 13 years old. It's important for our kids to know the value of waiting, the beauty of waiting until you have this person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. It's beauty. And if you talk about that early and often, then when they see all kinds of perversions, when they hear all kinds of perverted talk, it will so be dissonant with what they have heard in their home that they'll come home and say, Mom and Dad, why are people talking this way about sex? And you'll be able to reaffirm the beauty of God. Or they'll even be able to start being salt and light with their relationships right there on the spot. Yeah, they will be unicorns in a lot of the rooms. And it's okay. I want my kids to be unicorns. I do. I want my kids in the midst of an environment where sex before marriage is fine, or sex with your gender is fine, or hey, whatever that is fine. I want my children to be a standard. And for them to actually voice their opinion in a way that's loving, but also strong, what a powerful influence. So I think our children need to be standards. So the sooner and the more often it's laid into them, God's original design for what sexual activity is supposed to be about, the less you'll have to fight the culture. I don't think we were created to fight the culture. I think we were created to create culture so strong inside of our children that it's just not even a fight. Chris. You want Mike? Here it comes.
But it also requires the culture of our homes to be different. So that means that the kind of media that we allow in our homes can't represent that, right? So we can't be watching every kind of movie we want to or every kind of song we want to in our house, because then that kind of incorporates that culture into our house.
Yeah.
So even though we think we're old enough so we can handle that, we're old enough, it's something that we need to restrict ourselves for our kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was a long time, Lauren will tell you, we didn't listen to any other music in our house but Christian music. Do you remember that? Oh, yeah. And then...
And we couldn't watch a lot of movies.
Yeah. And we couldn't watch a lot of movies or anything like that. And as our children matured and grew, and now they can discern good from evil. And this is really important. I've said this before, and I think it's important to say again. I think Adam and Eve were eventually going to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Otherwise, why have the tree? But I think what the Lord wanted them to do was to walk with Him first. And as they walked with Him and learned His heart, and then they began to see evil, they'd be able to discern it. The whole point is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's both. So if they don't have any understanding of maturity, of walking with the Father and have His heart, and then suddenly they hear... name a song on the radio. I don't even know. My girls could probably list off some of those songs on the radio right now. But when they hear one of these songs that talks in a completely different culture than what they've been raised in, they'll know, okay, that's not the culture I'm going to live by. And then it's a good beat. It's not, ooh, I can't wait to live this lifestyle. There are some kids that are learning lifestyle from music and television. Yeah, from the songs. They're learning lifestyle. And music, TV, and movies is normalizing something. That's why I get so frustrated with Hollywood being such a, sudden moral compass for America when they have been the propagators of some of the worst behavior devised by human imagination. If you want to talk about the pot calling the kettle black, I don't understand it. Why would you want to make millions upon millions of dollars on behavior that you're ready to crucify people with? It doesn't make any sense to me. Yet, we're pounding this out to our children. We're pounding this out to a society that's not creating an intentional culture in their homes. If you create an intentional culture in your home, and then I actually believe it's my responsibility, this is going to sound strange to you, to slowly introduce the world's culture to my children. I want them to learn, get this, hear me, worldly songs. If my child's going to watch a PG-13 movie or an R-rated movie, they're going to watch it with me. And we're going to help them discern good from evil with me. My children will tell you, I mean, it's only been one, it's about to be two, you're going to drink alcohol with me first. You're going to feel what it's like to have a buzz on with me. I want you to know what that feels like now, here, in a safe environment with mom and dad before you're ever with other friends and family. And if you did it with other friends and family, it stopped. With other friends, it stops now until you learn how to handle it rightly with us. I think it's our responsibility to do those sorts of things so that when they do experience it in real life, they've had mom and dad with them in it. The culture that we've created, they now carry into those environments. And now we have salt and light in the earth. Not innocent doves without wisdom of serpents. John.
So we recently made some pretty big changes in our house. And a lot of it was, some personal things between us, but you had said something about kind of narrowing your child's vision, as far as what they see of the world. I just want to say it's never really too late to start to do that, even if there has been a lot of worldly influences. And these may seem like big steps, they may seem like extreme things, but I can tell you there's been some immediate effects. The internet is gone in our house. We don't have it anymore. The kids don't have access to electronics. And immediately, just within a very short amount of time, what you're seeing is where they might not have been maybe interested in the movie that I had on TV. When that's the only movie on TV, suddenly it becomes a little bit more interesting. And they're there, and they're moving together. They're moving into these rooms to talk to each other. They're coming out of their rooms. They're coming out of their shells, and they're starting to speak. And there's some of those things that you're immediately going to experience in the tough conversations, the stubbornness, the just flat refusal to talk. And you just, like you said, you have to keep pushing forward. You have to keep moving forward. You have to keep encouraging those conversations, having those conversations, repeating yourself, and it starts out at the most extreme end of that, where it's just, I'm not going to say anything, and then maybe you can start to see reactions. You can start to see feelings, whether that's crying or upset or anger, and even if you're not getting a response, if you're continuing with the conversation and you're having it despite their best efforts not to have that conversation, you can still start to see where you're hitting home by gauging physical reactions.
There you go.
That you're seeing, and you're making progress in that way. And all these things that you've been talking about lately with parenting, when you're saying instead of to your child, why did you do this? Why did you behave this way? This is wrong. You need to know this is wrong. The most poignant thing I said to my kid was, "This isn't like you."
There you go.
And that was probably the thing that I said that got the instant, immediate reaction. This isn't like you.
You're connecting to their original
This
identity.
isn't who you are.
There you go.
Beautiful. And the effect of setting aside those distractions, even in a home where they've always had access to those things, is immediate and evident and powerful. And it's not just us being able to talk to our children better, it's them coming to us and saying, Mom and Dad, these are the things that I feel, these are the problems that I've had, these are the issues that I've had, and this is what I want you to know about. And it's not that anybody's got to force anybody to do it. It's just when all the distractions are set aside, then they want to do those things.
Yep.
And you realize that they want a relationship and they realize they want one too.
Yeah. So I love that, John. Paul used different analogies as far as training to be, good Christian people. And one of the things I'm thinking about is in the military. In the military, they give you basic training for what, 4 months? Something like that? Anybody in the military around here?
Yeah, it was 3 months.
3 months? 4 months? 3 months. Okay. For 3 months, you're being trained here. You're not facing an enemy. You're being trained internally. You're getting the fat off. You're getting your mind right. You're learning discipline again, or for the first time. Really, you're the only enemy. And I feel like you don't, and again, I was never in the military, kind of wish I was. If I had to do all over again, I'd be in the military. But they don't actually face the enemy until they have been narrowed. That's what the word trained means. Train up a child in the way they should go. It means narrowed. It means focused. It means becoming accurate as a human being. So soldiers are not facing someone that wants to kill them until they're trained in who they're supposed to be. And I think we need, as parents, to be much more intentional. Stop inviting what wants to kill them into their lives too early. They are being trained right now. They are in your home right now for a very short period of time. And if you invite death in too early, it's like when Adam and Eve have a talk with a serpent before they're ready. Why would you let that happen? Train up your child, narrow them, give them that intentional culture Chris just talked about, that John just described. You're right, it's never too late to create that culture now. And then slowly, as you see this blossoming maturity and this father's heart and this identity that you know is becoming sure and solid, slowly introduce them. And then, like I said, they will be salt, light, and love in an earth. They won't want to become like it. They'll want to redeem it. You hear me? I really want that to be important. Did you guys hear that? Thank you for your patience tonight. Hope this was helpful. March is just about over. So that's it for parenting, family, that sort of thing. You're on your own. I love y'all.